welcome back to another episode of Jacey's Creek. My name is Emily, and this is a podcast where we talk about Pacey and Joey as a couple and as individuals, so that way we can get an aspect of who they are as people. I think a lot of the times we go over who they are and what they want to be and all this different kind of stuff, but we never really get what it means to have them together. And so today is a really big episode. It's the last episode with Andy in it, and I think that's one of the saddest things, to be honest. And so we go over that, and I think a lot of this episode you really have to dig into what it means and how it goes, because we see a lot of jealousy, we see a lot of anger. However, at the very end we kind of get where all that stuff is coming from. So if you have not already, make sure to follow my Instagram. That's Witter and Potter. My TikTok, that's Pacey and Joey. And lastly, make sure to comment, go on the YouTube channel, subscribe to it, so that way you don't miss any episode while you're watching YouTube. You'll see my lovely name every Friday, Saturday, and Sunday, and you can get wherever you get your podcast, make sure to review. So without further ado, let's get into this episode. So this episode, I believe, came out on November 15th, 2000. Again, we don't really know because, let's be honest here, this is Wikipedia. So the first scene that we have is scene 1 of Joey, and she is sitting in a chair in the college admissions office while the advisor gets some files from the cabinet and sits down at her desk. And the advisor says, "It suits you." And Joey says, "What's that?" And the advisor says, "The look deer sitting in the road of senior year, caught in headlights of the college indecisive." And Joey says, "I'm seriously considering just running away and joining the circus." And the advisor says, "Well, what do you say we keep that one as a fallback? Okay? I know this college application process can be daunting." And Joey says, "But you are, well, ahead of the game. It's set for Williams College. I'm missing your pure recommendation from the person who knows you best." And Joey says, "Right." And she clears her throat and the advisor says, "You got the easy part. You just need to pick someone." And Joey says, "Mm-hmm." And the advisor says, "Is that going to be a problem?" And Joey says, "No. I was just kind of hoping to take a vacation from large choices that carry even larger consequences." And the advisor says, "Let's try this. Close your eyes and just humor me." And Joey uncomfortably chuckles, and the advisor says, "Okay, clear your mind of everything. It's just open in the air." And Joey chuckles, and the advisor says, Now picture the question. Who is the one person that knows Joey Potter the best? Okay? Open your eyes. Who do you see?" And that's when the opening credits happen. And then it goes to scene 1 of Pacey, where he is in Andy's bedroom, and Andy is going through some of her stuff when Pacey comes in carrying books. And Pacey says, "Garching your literature to and from is getting tiresome, McPhee." And Andy says, "Oh, well, pardon me if I'm not in a rush to hit the high school halls and be stared at like some kind of social leopard." And Pacey says, "It wouldn't be like that." And Andy says, "Oh, come on. I mean, can't you hear it? Ooh, there's that really smart girl who charmed herself to death inside the inflammable funhouse." And Pacey says, "Andy, if our high school didn't have a history of forgiving stupidity, how do you think I'll be able to walk the halls, huh?" Which I think it kind of goes back to how Pacey is as a person. He's always reminding his friends, that he's stupid. And they won't say anything about it sometimes. But really, when we go back to it, it's kind of like how him and Tamara were doing all that different kind of stuff, and he walked down the hallways and everyone was laughing at him. And that is what Andy is scared of right now. And Pacey knows that, but he's like, "You just gotta toughen it up. And like Dawson's advice, you just gotta keep going." And Pacey says, and Andy says, "You guys have been really good about coming to visit me, but you've been all alone. Nobody's talking about the other night, and nobody's talking to each other." And Pacey says, "Well, yeah, we're not in the most huggy of groups right now. I mean, our previous fractal circus of friends have gone and fractured itself again." And Andy says, "You mean Jack and Jen. And Pacey says, no, I mean everybody. And Andy says that's ridiculous because we all talk about this. And Pacey says, well, you talked about it. You gave the whole two to tango speech, but so far I can tell every tango needs someone to leave. Which, I mean, Pacey, that was the whole episode for the tango. And Andy says, and why does everyone so insist that everyone insists that person has to be Jen? I told you, it's not her fault, okay? I'm gonna fix this. I'm gonna get us a hold of this. And Pacey says, why? I mean, honestly, why, Andy? I mean, maybe not all friendships need to be saved. Maybe it's just not to spend a certain part of our lives with a certain amount of people and move on. Isn't the whole year supposed to be anyway, moving on? And Andy says, Pacey, we moved on without moving away from each other. And Pacey says, well, maybe we can't. So I think at this moment, I think it kind of goes back to how everyone is doing with their friendships. Like Dawson and Pacey aren't doing good with their friendship. Jen and Jack aren't doing good with friendships, while Jen and Andy aren't doing good with their friendships because everything that happened the last episode. But personally, I don't think Pacey's talking about Andy. I think he's talking about himself. Like, I think he's like, sometimes it's just meant to move on and you just gotta keep going on. And it's one of those things where he's not wrong at all about it. Like, he's not wrong that some friendships just have to keep going. And I think that's the whole version of what this season's really about in the beginning, because we keep seeing this. And it's like I said a couple episodes back, like, a lot of the time we just constantly like think in our head how our friendships are supposed to be, and when they don't work out we get all upset like Andy is right now. And I think honestly, like Pacey said, sometimes we just have to move on and we have to keep going on. And I really do like how Pacey views that point of view. So then we have scene 1 of Pacey and Joey. And this scene, Pacey pulls up in his family's SUV and he goes to find Joey sitting on the couch. And I love the big smile that she has on her face, and he has a big smile in his face. And by the way, Gretchen's in the kitchen. And he says hey, and Joey says hey, and Pacey says Andy sends her best, and Joey goes, I was wondering where you were. And they start kissing when Gretchen interrupts them and goes, don't mean to interrupt, but Pacey, what day is it? And Pacey says Thursday. And Gretchen says, and Thursday is, and Pacey says, the day after Wednesday. And Gretchen says, haha, cute. I like to see how cute you are when you find out there's nothing left to eat with Junior Mints and stale cookie crust. And Pacey says, because Thursday is a certain sibling is supposed to remember he's on grocery duty. Got the keys, bolting out the door. And he kisses Joey. And he says, you want the list? And he goes, not right now. And he kisses Joey again, and Gretchen says, the list. And Pacey says, don't believe a word she says, she lies. And Gretchen goes, goodbye, Pacey. I'm like, okay. I would have expected him just to pick Joey up and just drag her out the door, like, come with me. Like, don't leave me. And so then Gretchen says, tell me everything before the enemy returns to camp. And Joey says, actually, Gretchen, there's something that I've been meaning to ask. And Gretchen says, what's that? And Joey says, how do you manage? And Gretchen says, what's that? And then Joey says, avoid college application distance. And Gretchen says, you might be dating one, Joey, but you can't get out of Witter, especially an older one. And Joey says, what do you mean? And Gretchen says, avoidance. You have something on your mind ever since you waltzed in here, and I finally got down to the subject, but I still need the text, so spill. And they head outside, and they sit on the bench, and Joey says, okay, I'm one recommendation short of finishing out my application to Williams. And Gretchen says, that's great. And Joey says, you haven't heard the punchline yet. The paperback is written by someone who knows you the best. And Gretchen says, the plot thickens. So have you asked him yet? And Joey says, who? And Gretchen says, Dawson. It's kind of sad. That's kind of really sad. Like, okay, so your brother is dating this girl, and you automatically go to the one person who hates your brother, Dawson. Like, Dawson does not like Pacey, and Dawson, I believe he knows her past, but he does not know her future. He doesn't know what she does in the morning. Well, he doesn't know what she did 3 months on this boat. But, like, really, like, she could have done 2. Like, honestly, when you think about it, she could have done 2 recommendations, but sadly, she did not. And so, Joey says, Dawson, I see. If I ask Dawson, not that I'm going to, but if I do ask him, Gretchen goes, what about Pacey? And Joey says, exactly. What about Pacey? I mean, no matter which I ask, someone's gonna get hurt. And Gretchen says, but that person shouldn't be you by default. You gotta be a little selfish here. The person who knows you the best, not the person who happened to be dating. And Joey says, so you're saying I should ask Dawson. But didn't they date, like not the person you should, like, are dating. I'm like, isn't that the person who knows you the best? Like, okay. And so Gretchen says, I'm saying you should ask the question. Which I'm like, that's awkward. That's really awkward. Your current, like, boyfriend's sister is telling you to go tell your ex-boyfriend, who was your current boyfriend's best friend, that they know you the best rather than your boyfriend. That's depressing. And so then the next scene of Joey is when they're in the Larry front porch, and Joey is about to knock when she has second thoughts and stops herself, and she turns and leaves and walks down the steps when she noticed Dawson coming out of the garage carrying a lot of painting supplies. And Dawson says, hey, and Joey says, hey, need some help with that? And Dawson says, yeah, something tells me you didn't come all this way just to carry paint, so did you finally realize how wrong it was? I've been working out off the deck to Mr. Brooks all by myself. And Joey says, me and my yacht club employees are forever in your debt, Dawson. And Dawson says, right, I'll put you on your tab. So, are you gonna ask me? And Joey says, ask me what? What? Joey says, ask me what? And Dawson says, you got a favor face on. And Joey says, I do not. And Dawson says, oh, now you got the I'm lying face on. And Joey says, okay, it's here. And she hands the peer recommendation, and Dawson says, the person who knows you best. Whoa. And Joey says, you said that already. And Dawson says, yeah, I just thought it had more impact the second time. And Joey says, so what do you think? And Dawson says, what do you think? And Joey says, I think that I want to say that you'll have to write it. I want you to say that you'll have it for me. That you'll write it for me. And Dawson says, are you sure I'm the right person? I mean, does Pacey know about this? And Joey says, no. But if you say yes, he will. Are you the right person, Dawson? Well, you're the only person who knows that I have a favor face on. I'm asking you, ponder the possibilities, okay? And if you decide to write on it, then you're the right person. And Dawson says, okay. So I don't really think that it's wrong of her to not tell Pacey about it, because I feel like her telling Pacey about it would just, like, start a little bit of drama that doesn't need to be told. But it's kind of like in season 2 where she didn't tell Dawson that she kissed Jack, and there was this whole big drama thing that was going on, or how she didn't tell Dawson that her and Pacey were a thing, and that became a big drama thing. And so now it's kind of like, okay, you're really gonna keep a secret from Pacey. Like, that's okay. So then we have the next scene, which is scene 2 of Pacey, and he's in Andy's room, and Andy is sitting on her bed writing some stuff down when there's a knock on the door, and Pacey walks in carrying more books. And Andy says, hey, and Pacey says, hey, I got some AP English with a side of cock. And Andy says, ooh, thanks. Pacey, I have a secret, and I know we haven't shared one of these in a long time, but I need to tell you or I'm going to burst. And Pacey says, sure thing, what's going on? And Andy says, my dad suggested that I take the rest of the school year off. Yeah, that I go to Italy for 6 months and see my aunt. And Pacey says, well, that's quite an offer. And Andy says, yeah, I know he's making making it. I mean, obviously because of last week he's worried, but we also talked about it, you know? I mean, really talked about this, and it's different this time. So, I don't know, like, I feel like it's her senior year, and a lot of things are gonna happen, but also she got into Harvard, and she did all this different kind of stuff, but I feel like it's kind of one of those, she's trying not to step back like she did last time, so therefore she's going off, and then you can just tell that Pacey's really worried about this. And so Pacey says, so what did Jack have to say about this? And Andy says, I thought he was going to be the first to volunteer to help me pack up, right? But instead he gives me all this sound arguments and reasons why I should stay. You know, he left once too. And Pacey says, yeah, but he moved across town, not across the world. And Andy says, so my father wants what's best for my health. My brother is being selfish out of love. And Pacey says, and you want a tiebreaker. And Andy says, come on, Pacey. You've done it before. In fact, you almost made a hobby out of saving my dentist in distress. And Pacey says, I didn't save you. You saved yourself. You took me along for the ride. Which, I love that. I love how he says that. Like, I didn't save you, Andy. You saved yourself. Like, I don't think Andy would believe him if he said that in the beginning of the season. Then, like, season 3 or season 2. And Andy says, well, then why can't I save myself now? Why am I making this decision so hard? You know, maybe Jack is right. Maybe going to Italy is running away. And Pacey says, from what? And Andy says, from everything. Taking the easy way out. Packing up when life hits a rough patch. And Pacey says, or maybe this is exactly what you need. To have strength and the will to take off the training wheels and try it riding on your own for a while. And Andy says, I don't know if I can do that, Pacey. I mean, a lot of what's been happening is because of me. And what are people going to think? And Pacey says, Andy, you can. You spend too much time worrying about everyone else. We all do. But at the end of the day, it's your life. It's not your dad's, it's not Jack, it's not mine, it's yours. And you need to live it. So you're the tiebreaker, Andy. I really like how he kind of says that, because it's kind of like saying, like, no matter what happens in your life, Andy, like, there are going to be people in your life who can, like, solve all your problems for you, but you have to be the one to decide that. And Andy was right. Like, when Andy was going through everything in season 2 at the end, where she was, like, seeing Tim again, and Pacey was right there, and he helped her out, but the biggest thing for that was because they were literally together, and Pacey was so concerned for her. And I'm not saying that Pacey isn't any less concerned for her, but I think it's different now, because now they're friends rather than boyfriend and girlfriend. And Pacey has his own girlfriend now, and Andy is just along for everything. So then we have the next scene, which is scene 2 of Pacey and Joey. And there's a scene at the Potter B&B where she's sitting at the end of the pier doing some reading when Dawson comes walk behind her. And Dawson says, hey. And Joey says, hey. And Dawson says, plowing through about tonight's reading as per usual. And Joey says, tried last night. I thought I catched up. But Mr. Coughlin in room 3, he has a tendency to break a song while bathing. And Jacqueline says, the seat taken? And Dawson says, it's okay. I can't stay. And he hands her the peer recommendation. And, she says the seat's not taken. And he hands her back the peer recommendation. And Joey says, well, either you're a really fast writer, which I know is not the case, or you come bearing bad news. And Dawson says, I've been thinking since the minute you asked me, and the answer just keeps coming back the same. I'm not the right person to write this, not anymore. And Joey says, you did what I asked. You thought about it, and I thank you for that. And Dawson says, sorry. And Dawson turns to leave, and that's when Pacey is standing there. And Dawson says, Pacey, and Pacey says, Dawson. So, play date? And Joey says, look, not exactly. I asked Dawson the peer recommendation for me. He said no, so really it's nothing. And Pacey says, well, that's not nothing. The nothing is you not telling me about it. It's the something that you keep a secret. And Joey says, I know this tone. and it signifies that this is a really nasty conversation. But you know what? It takes to have two to have one, and I'm not sparing for it, not over this. And Pacey says, so now you get to decide what we're going to talk about through. But you also get to decide what we're allowed to slide. Were you ever going to tell me about this? And Joey says, it's hard to tell you about things this week. You're never around. And Pacey says, okay, look, if you're angry with me for how much time we're spending with Andy, look. And Joey says, Pacey, that's not it, okay? I was waiting to see if he'll agree to do it in the first place before War of Lord. Where are we now? 15? And you're upset if I asked him, Pacey? It's because it was a question. You know, third grade, Dawson was there when I broke my left arm jumping off Peter Vincent's backyard to me. He was there the night I came home early from the lake inlands because I was homesick. And he was there the day that I had the horrific shining bug for the first time, the day my mother passed away. You know, he was the first person through the door, and he sat with me the whole time. He never once asked me how I was doing because he, unlike everyone else, he knew how well that there was there to describe me. So really, Pace, you can't be angry for asking me that. And Pacey says, I'm not angry that you asked Dawson to do something for me. As to question the person who knows you best, when do I get to be that person? So, yeah, Dawson did all that thing, but, like, Pacey was the one to drive you to... Pacey was probably the one who kissed you first, because there was that, like, whole, like... I bet she kissed Dawson first, actually, when thinking about it. Well, Pacey was the person who said it, like... Pacey was the one who drove you to your dad's jail. Pacey was the one who made sure, like, you had a best experience on that summer boat. Pacey was the one who dragged you out of that ice house while Dawson was saving your dad. But Pacey was also the one who, like, made you feel alive and made you feel needed. And Pacey was the one who did all that different kind of stuff. Like, when is Pacey ever going to be able to say that? You know, like, Joey and Pacey have all the experience throughout this whole show. And now all of a sudden, Joey's like, well, Dawson was the one who did this, and Dawson was the one who did that. And it kind of goes back to season 3, episode 21, where Dawson was like, how can you compete with history? Like, how do you think that you're going to compete with history, Pacey? Because she's always going to be that, thinking that in the back of her head. And that's why Pacey's mad at this moment. It isn't because, like, it's the question, who knows you best? It's really the fact that, like, it's Dawson. Like, it's Dawson who told him in the last season that Joey is always going to have him in the back of her head. And there's going to be so many firsts in this season, but I think it goes back to Joey just has not dealt with the history between her and Dawson. And I feel like when we really go back to that, I feel like there's a lot of things that happen in the season that we'll see, and it will kind of go back to how Joey and Dawson are different now. Like, once she deals with their first with Pacey, that's how it makes it completely different. And it's kind of sad when Pacey says, when do I get to be that person? And the truth is, Pacey's going to be that person for the rest of her life. And obviously he doesn't know that, and he doesn't know that at the moment, because the only thing that's running through his head is, damn, Dawson is right. And the only thing that's running through Joey's head is, oh crap, this is going to be a whole nother argument. So, like, with another thing that I always find funny is when Joey and Pacey are having an argument, Joey will always get mad at Pacey for starting the argument a little bit, but, like, he doesn't. She's the one that does something, and she just doesn't want to deal with it. But I honestly think it's because whenever Dawson and her had an argument in season 2, they never dealt with it, so now she doesn't know how to deal with an argument, so that's why she always, like, kind of throws it back on him. So then we have the next scene, which is scene 3 of Pacey and so they're outside the Larry's fish house when Dawson is walking up to it when he runs into Joey walking in the same direction. And Joey says, Dawson, you look like you slipped from fish duty tonight. And Dawson says, thank you. And Joey says, did your mom enlist your service for this evening? And Dawson says, no, actually I was paying a customer tonight. I'm having dinner with Andy. And Joey says, that's strange because I'm having dinner with Andy. And Dawson says, really? And Jack comes to join them. And Jack says, hey guys. And Dawson says, let me guess, dinner with Andy? And Jack says, yeah, how'd you know? And they go inside to find Pacey sitting there. And Dawson chuckles kind of uncertainly. And he goes, Pacey. And then Joe goes, what's going on? Where's Andy? And Pacey says, she's in the back room perfecting the answer to your first question. And Jack says, what's all this about? And Pacey says, I don't know. Don't shoot the diner. I'm the guest, just like you. And Andy comes out of the bathroom and Andy says, hey guys, thanks for coming. And Pacey says, so we're all here. What's this about? And Andy says, you'll find out shortly. We're just waiting for one person. And Pacey says, Andy, come on, this is... And Jen enters behind them. And Andy chuckles and says, oh wait, here she is. Hey, and Jen, hey Jen. And Jen says, hi, we saved you. Jen says, hi, we saved you a seat. And Jack says, you know what? I'm not that hungry, Andy. Can you bring me a doggy bag? And Jen says, it's obvious that I'm the one crashing the party. I'll go. And Jack says, I was going. And Andy says, no, I am. I'm leaving Cape Side, and that's why I wanted you guys to come here tonight, to say goodbye. And also, there's something I need to say to you guys, all of you, before I go. So, Jen, Jack, please stay. And they all sit down, and Andy says, you know what? It should have been the scheme to get you all here tonight. When my dad first made me the offer to take the rest of the year off, I sat there with my truly number 2 and made my list of pros and cons. The cons were pretty obvious. Opportunities of a lifetime, right? And then when it came to the nasty cons, you know what got top billing? You guys. The thought of leaving my friends. I mean, you guys are the ones who support me and consolate me and understood uncontrollably. But look at you guys now. We're a mess. And let's talk about why. Starting in the last week's finances, okay? Enough with the blame Jen game. If I don't, you shouldn't. Yes, she had them, but I took them. It was my fault. And Pacey, Joey, Dawson, you guys are so lucky. Do you have any idea how rare it is to have friends at the beginning? And then in the beginning there were three of you and now 2. And she turns to Jack and Jen and she goes, and you know what? This is just inexcusable. The biggest reason that you're keeping me here was just the thought if I left you, you wouldn't have been a sister around. But I realized that you would. When I first met you, I didn't know how much about love or friendship. And each of you taught me how about that. So maybe by me leaving, I can do the favor, because the thought of ending it like this, and Annie sniffs and says, the way things are, it's just maybe it's not how I remember us. Do you? And the camera goes to all their faces, and Jen gets up and hugs Andy. So I think at this moment, Andy is totally right. Like, everything that's happening from everywhere and everyone, like, things are gonna happen, and she's like, don't blame Jen. Like, don't blame Jen. And I think that's really, like, a good scene, because Pacey was telling her earlier, like, why bother? Why just not move on? And I feel like that is the complete opposite from Andy, and we see that in that scene. So then we have scene 4, Pacey and Joey, and they're by the bathroom door, and Pacey's knocking on the door when Joey comes to him, and he knocks on the door again, and Joey says, is anyone in there? And Pacey says, yeah, and there's only room for one. Oh, which I guess is a reoccurring theme these days. And Joey sighs and says, Pace, I'm really sorry. And Pacey says, hold on a second, let me finish this time. And he goes, oh, Joe, I'm sorry how I reacted to the whole peer wreck thing. I think it's just kind of the left hook hot button I reacted, like Pacey. And Joey says, you know who that guy reacted is going to be like in 10 years, Pace? The person who knows me best. Dawson knows my past. My future lies with you. If you think about it, you know, you didn't even like me a few years ago. And Pacey says, well, you always love the ones you tease. Well, you always tease the ones you love. And Joey says, and you do have to deal with the ones that you used to love. And Pacey sighs, and that's where they look at Pacey, well, they look at Andy and Dawson, who's laughing at the table, and Pacey gets a kiss on his forehead from Joey. And I really like this scene because one of the big things about this scene, it kind of like foreshadows what happened. Like when Aunt Gwen told like Pacey that he was teasing the one that was like Joey, who was running around on the last time that Aunt Gwen saw them two. Like he was teasing her, and even like Gretchen said, like, I knew that you two were gonna be together because you were always teasing her and messing with her. And I feel like it always showed how much Pacey cared about Joey, but I think the only thing that was standing in the way was Dawson. And Joey knows that the guy who's gonna know her the best is Pacey, and it's probably gonna be Pacey for the rest of her life. But at one point, there was a guy, aka Dawson, who knew her the best, just like how Andy knew Pacey the best in season 2. Like, each season there's someone who knows each other the best, whether that's Dawson or that's Pacey. But the thing that Joey knows is that no matter what, Pacey's gonna know her and who she is in 10 years because she doesn't plan on leaving. And I really like that statement because it's just kind of like how when Pacey promised her that he's not going to go anywhere, and he's going to go exactly where she's going to go, and he follows up for what he's going to say, and Joey kind of follows up with what she's going to say, and she reminds Pacey that they have to deal with the ones they love. And I really like that scene because it goes back to how you can love someone and you can unlove them, but you're always going to have to deal with that emotions, and you're always going to have to deal with that feeling. So then we have the next scene, which is scene 3 of Joey. And they're outside the restaurant, and Joey is standing on the edge looking at the water when Dawson comes up to join her. And Dawson, chuckling, says, I knew I'd find you here. And Joey says, that you didn't know me anymore, Dawson. And Dawson says, the truth is, I never doubt how I knew you, Joey. I was afraid of what would happen if I put it all down on paper. Before you told me that if I decided to write the recommendation that I was the right person for the job. If the offer still stands, I would really like you to do it for me. So another thing that always irks me when they say that Dawson knows her the best, I'm like, well, Pacey was the one who encouraged her to do art because he knew that's how much it meant to her. He knew that the B&B was something that she wanted because he knew that was something that she cared about. He knew that she flipped her hair when she's nervous, and she does that grin, and she bites her lip when she's nervous because that's how he knows her the best. And it kind of always irked me when they say that Dawson knows her the best. I'm like, no. And so then we have Joey said, I like that too. Thank you. And Dawson says, that's nice. And they see Andy and Pacey sitting on the bench, and Joey says, gives them something to hold on to. And Dawson says, well, what do you say you come inside and help give us all to hold on to? And I think at this moment, like, this episode is kind of based off of exes and how everyone deals with stuff. And I think how Dawson and Joey deal with stuff, it's kind of like there's always some type of romantic thing, but it's every other episode. And now it's kind of like with this episode, it's kind of like they're trying to get back into good territory. And I wouldn't say that Pacey and Dawson are in bad shape, but they kind of are. Like, they got a little bit better since the last time they spoke, like, alone, which was in episode 3. But I feel like right now, it's kind of, like, iffy, if you know what I mean. So then we have the last scene, which is scene 3 of Pacey. And Andy and Pacey are on the bench, like we saw with how Joey and Dawson saw them. And Andy says, this could potentially be the last time. And I think this is where they had their first dance and all this different kind of stuff. And that's why Joey says, get them something to hold on to. And I think that's kind of weird. And Pacey says, oh, don't say that. There's no need for that. I think that was where their first dance was. And he says, you'll be back, There's prom and there's graduation. And he says, and there's a whole nother world out there. Pacey, you said it yourself. And Pacey says, is that why you're doing this? Because I said that? And Andy says, whoa, Pacey, you gave me strength, the strength to do things I never knew I needed, but was too afraid to do. And Pacey says, no, I'm sorry. I don't think that I used the adjective afraid anymore while being self-reflected. You can be used brave and perhaps occasionally some self-word and steward. What is that word? Me not knowing what it is. Okay, hold on. I'm gonna look at the definition. Okay, it's like steward word. Oh, loyal, reliable, and hardworking. Okay, that was sometimes, again, when I look at like Dawson's Creek and how they word things, I'm like, what are you even saying? And Andy says steward word. No, I hate steward word. And Pacey says, well, that's too bad. You're stuck with steward word. You know, I think we're gonna miss that most about you, McPhee. It's the fact that you're overwhelming optimistic. You're Arthur's belief that everything in the world is the most wonderful until proven crap. Do you think maybe you could leave us a little bit with that when you go? And Amy says, oh, at least I could do. And they hug, and Pacey says, I'm gonna miss you, Andy. And Andy says, me too. I will always say this. I really do like how Andy and Pacey's relationship worked out. Like, they don't have a relationship like Dawson and Joey, which I feel like is one of the best things, because Dawson and Joey are like kind of like iffy back and forth a little bit to me. But Andy and Pacey always have this 100% like honest friendship, and it's one of my favorite things. Like, the fact that they can act like this and still be ex, and Andy may or may not be in love with him, but there's a lot of things that just go on where I'm like, wow, this is a great friendship. And I'm really, really sad that Andy left, because it makes me so mad, because I'm like, you know what? And so then we have scene 5 of Pacey and Joey, and they're inside the restaurant, and everyone's gathering around while Dawson sets up the camera, and Jack says, hey, and Andy says, hey. And Jack says, hey, look, Andy, the only reason that I said you shouldn't go is because I'm gonna miss you more than anything. And Andy says, good. And Jack says, the thought of not having you around or having to say goodbye. And Andy says, Jack, you're my brother. There's no goodbyes. And Jack says, I love you. And Andy says, I love you too. And Dawson sets the camera and joins over to them, or Pacey, Jack sets the camera. And Pacey says, okay, everybody, let's do this. And we're on the clock. And Dawson goes up to next to Andy, but she moves them between him and Pacey. And how it's set up is Andy is on the left side, and it goes from the left side where Andy, Jack, Jen, Joey, Pacey, and Dawson, which I really like that whole setup. And how their faces are is like Andy's giving a smile. Jack's whole smile was just perfect. Jen's smile was kind of like iffy, and Joey's giving like this no teeth smile. No one is showing teeth except Jack. Like, I'm like, is no one else gonna show teeth? Like, is that how it's gonna be in this episode? And then we have Pacey giving no teeth and Dawson giving no teeth, which I'm like, all their hair is something else. Like, Andy has like the best hairdo. Jen's hairdo is better in season 4. Joey's hairdo is good right now. Pacey has like this buzz cut. Dawson has like his like long hair, which I actually like. And then like Jack has like his regular haircut. And I think Jack's like the tallest out of all of them, to be completely honest. Or like Dawson, I can't really tell. And the last part of this, there's like in loving memory of David Duke's 1945 to 2000. And I just want to say that's Andy's dad in this, or Jack and Andy's dad in this whole show. And it's sad that he passed away. I was not expecting that when I saw that. I was like, oh my gosh, that is so sad. So, in loving memory of him, who passed 22 years ago. That is so sad. Anyway, and so I really do like this episode because it kind of gives like the vibe of everything that's happening. I really like how like Dawson and Joey are still kind of like being friends, but not really being friends. I love how Joey kind of has to remind Pacey that yeah, they have history, but there's going to be new history involved. I really like how Pacey and Andy still have like everything that's happening happened, like, at the end of the day, like, they're still good friends. And I kind of wish throughout the show we saw Pacey kind of phone Andy once in a while and be like, hey, I need help. That would have been kind of funny. But I wish we saw, like, a jealous scene between